We have total cost. Total cost is made up of fixed cost plus variable cost. What is a fixed cost? A fixed cost is that cost that will not change irrespective of change in activity level. My fixed cost is that cost that will not change irrespective of change in activity level. What do we mean by activity level? Is the number of units produced. The assumption is that you are dealing with a manufacturing company. So if the number of units produced changes, the fixed cost will not change. A good example is rent. If you're making cake, if you like you produce 10 cake, you produce 1,000 cake. Your rent you paid for the rent you paid will not change. So we say such a cost is a fixed cost. Such cost does not respond to the change in the number of units produced. It does not respond to the change in activity level. That's what I mean by activity level. Whereas a variable cost is the cost that will change in line with the activity level. For a fixed cost, the diagram for a fixed cost is like this. It remains stable fixed cost. So let's say your fixed cost, your rent is 10,000 naira. It will not change. It will remain 10,000 naira whether you produce 10 units, you produce 20 units, you produce 30 units. Your cost remain constant at 10,000 naira. Let's say the rent you're paying is 10,000. So we are saying that cost will not change. It will remain as 10,000 naira. Even as the cost increases. So that's what we mean. However, we have the variable cost. Your variable cost is that cost that will vary in line with the change in the activity level. A good example is material. If you produce cake, part of your material of producing your cake is part of the material used in producing cake can be flour, it can be sugar and all the rest. So for instance, if we say to produce one big cake, you need a cup of flour to produce a cake, a cup of flour. It means to produce two cake, you need 2 cups of flour. Of course, that means the prices will also change in that line. So if a cost for a cup of flour is 1,000 naira, it means if I produce two cake, I will need 2 cups of flour, which exactly will be 2,000 naira. So that's what we mean by a cost that varies in line with the change in activity level. So a fixed cost, a variable cost rather have this diagram. So if 1 unit is produced, okay, if 10 units were produced, the cost, let's say the cost was 1,000. You produce 20 units, the cost increase to 2,000. You produce 30, the cost also increased to 3,000. So sorry, I think okay, this is axis is for quantity and cost. For quantity and cost. So as the quantity increases, this cost increases. We have another cost which is called your variable cost per unit, which is your variable cost broken down into the cost for 1 unit. So that is like saying out of this 10,000 units I produce, for the first one, 10,000 units give me 1,000. What is the cost of each of the units? So to get that, it will be you have your total variable cost, you have your quantity, then you have your variable cost for 1 unit. That is variable cost per unit. Like what we use the example we are working with. We said we have 3,000 units, 3,000 naira, sorry, was incurred for 30 units, 2,000 for 20 units, and 1,000 for 10 units. So the cost for one will be 3,000 divided by 30, which will give me 100. So it gives me 100. 2,000 divided by 20 gives me 100 to get cost of each of these 20. For this last one, there are 10 units. Those 10 units in total cost 10,000, 1,000 naira. So cost of each unit will be this total variable cost. That's the total variable cost of 10 units divided by the number of units, which is 10, will give me 100. So if you notice, you'll see that the variable cost per unit is constant as 100, 100, 100 naira all through. That tells us that fixed costs and variable costs per unit have the same behavior. They remain constant even as activity change. So when activity was 10 units, our fixed cost, which is I said here in this case is rent, was 10,000 naira we pay to rent the building. It remained constant at 10,000 naira even when we was 20, 30. The same thing applies to variable cost per unit. You will see here that when we also produce 30, 20, 10, the cost per unit remain constant. So this is the difference between a variable cost, which is the total cost, the total variable cost, and the variable cost for one unit. The total variable cost has this behavior of moving straight line, like we can see in this diagram. That's the total variable cost. So that will give you a good understanding of how what we call variable cost. We also have a cost called mixed cost. Mixed cost, written like this, or also called semi variable cost, is a cost that has both mixed and fixed in one. So it has both fixed it has both fixed and variable cost in one. So a cost that has both an element of variability and fixed is what you call a mixed cost. So it means that the cost has a function to its character can operate as a fixed cost as written here. It can remain constant. After a while, it can also change. We have a cost called step cost. It's in line with mixed cost. A step cost, it goes in this direction. So like a step format, you can see that when when the number of units produced, for instance, let's say 10 was produced, let's say 1 was produced here. Sorry, let's use a better. So let's say at the beginning 2 units was produced, 3 units was produced, nothing happened, the cost remained constant. Even let's say 1 unit was produced, cost remained constant. Probably when it got to 4, which is this, the cost took a leap. So which means the cost was constant even when 1 unit were produced, it was still constant. till it got to the 4 units were produced. It now took a leap up. It behaves like a variable cost and now changes and moved up. So there was a lump sum increase. So it remained constant like that. Probably we produce 5, 6 until we got to 7. It now took a leap again. So it behaves in that manner. It will remain constant for a certain period or for a relevant range of activity, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then it took another leap again. That's my diagram. So that is how a step cost behaves. It moves in this line. It remains constant for a relevant range of activity, after which it took another leap. So this is likened to a mixed cost, or what you call semi-variable cost. But we are saying here generally that a semi-variable cost is a cost that has both an element of fixed and variability in it. So in most cases, examiner will need you to separate this cost into variable and fixed. So that takes us into how do you separate a cost into variable and fixed. We have various methods. We have the account analysis method, or also called account classification method. So that takes us to what we call cost estimation. Cost estimation. So most times you are given cost for a particular period, and you are expected to estimate what cost will be in the following year. There are various methods. We have the account classification method. We have the simple regression analysis method, or what you call the least square method. We have 3, the high and low method. Then 4, we have the scatter diagram. The scatter diagram method. These are the fields. We also have what we call the engineering method. So, but we will concentrate on this because that is not much of a not being considered. Even this account classification method is not much considered because of how subjective it is. That's a major setback with account classification, or what you call the account analysis method. So we'll quickly look at how do you separate a cost into variable and fixed. First of all, before we go to that, we have what you call the cost function. Your cost function is stated as y is equal to a plus bx, where y stands for total cost, a stands for your fixed cost, b stands for your variable cost per unit. That's variable cost for 1 unit. And x stands for the number of units produced, or what you call the activity level. X and y are the 2 variables here, whereas x and y are the 2 variables here, whereas a and b are the 2 constants. If you check earlier where we discussed here, we said you can see A, this stands for A, fixed cost A, and this stands for your B, variable cost per unit. You can see they are constant. They are constant even when activity was changing from 10, 20, 30. They remain constant. So that's what we mean by that these two costs, fixed costs and variable cost per unit, are constant in the cost function as we have written here. They are constant in the cost function. Whereas y and x are variable. Now y is the y here, which is the total cost, is the dependent variable. Whereas x is the independent variable. We will come to this later, meaning that y depends on x. Your total cost depends on the number of units produced. So what drives your cost is how many units you produce. If you produce more, of course you agree with me that your total cost will change. If you produce less, your total cost, which is y, will also drop. So that is why we say y is depending on x. Y is the dependent variable, x is the dependent variable.